Black twins take a simple DNA test for a school project, but the results spark chaos. The doctor's hands tremble as he frantically calls 911, while their mother's face drains of color, her years of secrecy unraveling in an instant. Authorities move swiftly to detain them, leaving the twins grappling with a reality they never imagined. What did the test reveal that could upend their lives? Why is their mother so desperate to shield them from the truth? The early morning sun spilled through the kitchen windows of the Carter family's humble home, casting golden streaks across the worn linoleum floor and aging wooden cabinets. Though the furnishings showed their years, the space radiated a comforting warmth, a testament to the love and resilience that filled its walls. At the small kitchen table, 16-year-old Mia Carter leaned intently over her sketchbook, her dark curls falling forward as she meticulously shaded a bowl of fruit illuminated by the morning light. Her pencil glided softly across the page, bringing the scene to life with each deliberate stroke. Beside her sat Lila Carter, Mia's identical twin in appearance, but her opposite in disposition. Lila's hair was pulled back into a tidy ponytail, and her focus was on the open textbook in front of her. Her fingers tapped rhythmically against the table as she committed biology notes to memory for an upcoming quiz. "Girls, breakfast is ready," their mother, Eleanor Carter, called gently from the stove. She stirred a pot of oatmeal, the aroma mingling with the soft hum of the morning. Eleanor's uniform, a crisp but well-worn waitress dress, was already on, neatly pressed despite its age. Her tired eyes carried both pride and an undercurrent of worry as she watched her daughters, their contrasting personalities painting a portrait of the family's quiet dynamics. "Just one more shadow," Mia murmured, her tongue peeking out as she concentrated on her artwork. "You always say that," Lila quipped without glancing up, a playful lilt in her voice. "Then you add another shadow, and before you know it, we're running late." Elena chuckled softly, setting steaming bowls of oatmeal in front of the girls. She added a light dusting of brown sugar, a touch they'd loved since they were little. "Eat up, my loves. Time to put the books and drawings away for now." Reluctantly, Mia added one final detail to her sketch before closing the notebook, and the family settled into a comfortable silence, broken only by the faint clinking of spoons and the distant murmur of cars passing on the street. Later, as the twins walked to school, their steps naturally fell into sync. Their matching backpacks swung lazily in opposite directions as they strolled through the well-worn streets of their working-class neighborhood. The crisp morning air carried a whisper of spring, a promise of warmer days ahead. "Oh, look!" Mia exclaimed suddenly, pointing across the street. "They've added to the mural." Her eyes sparkled as she admired the new swirls of color splashed across an old brick wall. Lila followed her sister's gaze, shaking her head with a fond smile. "Only you would notice that. Meanwhile, I'm running through chemical equations in my head." "That's because you're a walking calculator," Mia teased, looping her arm through Lila's. "And I'm a free spirit." "More like a scattered spirit," Lila shot back with a laugh. "Somebody has to keep us organized." Their playful banter carried them all the way to Roosevelt High, where they joined the wave of students flowing through the doors. In their shared homeroom, Ms. Robinson, a young teacher with a bright smile and kind eyes, stood at the front of the room, waiting for her class to settle. "Good morning, everyone," she began, her enthusiasm lighting up the room. "I have some exciting news. This semester we're starting a special project called Family Heritage Journey." She turned to the whiteboard and neatly wrote the project's title in large letters. Mia straightened in her seat, her imagination already buzzing with ideas. Beside her, Lila tilted her head thoughtfully, her analytical mind mapping out potential approaches to the assignment. This project, Ms. Robinson continued, is a chance for you to delve into your family's roots. You can explore through DNA testing, interviews with relatives, or historical research. The goal is to create a detailed presentation that celebrates what makes your family truly unique. The twins exchanged a glance, one brimming with excitement, the other tempered with careful calculation. Though their approaches would be different, the project promised to uncover something meaningful about their shared history. The classroom buzzed with an undercurrent of excitement, a palpable energy that seemed to electrify the air. Mia's hand shot up instantly, her mind already brimming with questions she couldn't wait to ask. Across the room, Lila watched her younger sister with a blend of amusement and curiosity, though a faint unease stirred in her stomach at the mention of DNA testing. By late afternoon, the golden sunlight streaming through the kitchen windows stretched into long, warm beams as Mia and Lila burst through the front door. Their excitement was infectious, their voices tumbling over one another as they called out for their mother. Elena, home early from her shift at the diner, stood by the counter slicing apples and spreading peanut butter onto a plate. "Mom, you won't believe the project we got today," Mia exclaimed, her backpack thudding to the floor as she rummaged through it for the handout. Her eyes sparkled with delight as she slapped the paper onto the counter. "It's called the Family Heritage Journey," Lila added, her tone more measured but her interest unmistakable. She eased into one of the kitchen chairs, picking up an apple slice and crunching thoughtfully. "We're supposed to research our family history," Mia chimed in, her enthusiasm spilling over as she glanced between her mother and sister. Elena smiled, a soft warmth lighting her face, though for a fleeting moment her expression wavered. "That sounds like a lovely project, girls. Maybe we could call your Aunt Emma. She knows so much about the family tree." "Actually," Mia interrupted, bouncing slightly on the balls of her feet, "we thought it'd be fun to do one of those DNA ancestry tests. Ms. Robinson says they're super accurate now, and we can find out the exact percentages of where we come from." Eleanor's knife froze mid-slice. For a moment, the room seemed to hold its breath as her hand trembled slightly. She set the knife down carefully on the cutting board. "Oh, I don't know about that, sweethearts," she said, her voice steady but subdued. "Those tests can get pretty expensive." Lila, always pragmatic, straightened in her chair. "We've been saving up our allowance," she explained, her tone calm and matter-of-fact. "If we split the cost, it's totally manageable. And it'll make our project way cooler," Mia added, pulling out a chair and dropping into it with a flourish. "Everyone else is just doing boring stuff like interviews and old photos. We'd really stand out." Eleanor wiped her hands on her apron, her movements slow and deliberate. "There are other ways to make your project special," she said, her smile strained but kind. "Your Aunt Emma has all those incredible stories about your grandfather's journey to America." Lila tilted her head slightly, her perceptive nature kicking in. "Mom," she said gently, "is something wrong? You seem worried about the DNA test." No, Eleanor replied quickly, her smile flickering. "I just want to make sure you're spending your money wisely." That night, in their shared bedroom, the soft glow of the computer screen illuminated Lila's face as she scrolled through DNA testing companies. Mia perched on the arm of the chair, pointing excitedly at options on the screen. "This one has amazing reviews," Lila murmured, clicking on a website. "It's super accurate, and it even checks for health markers." "Perfect," Mia leaned closer, her enthusiasm contagious. And look, they're having a sale. A faint creak from the hallway made them pause. They looked up to see their mother standing in the doorway, her hands clasped tightly together. Her expression was calm, supportive even, but her body betrayed her tension. "Found a good company?" she asked, her voice light but tinged with something unspoken. "Yes," Mia beamed. "We're going with Ancestry Gen. They're really well known." Elena nodded slowly. That's wonderful, girls. Just let me know when the kits arrive, okay?" She turned and walked away, the soft click of her bedroom door signaling her retreat. Hours later, when the house had fallen silent and the girls were asleep, Elena sat alone on the living room couch. The soft light of a lamp cast a warm glow over her weary face and trembling hands. With a deep breath, she reached for the family portrait hanging on the wall, carefully removing the backing. Behind it, tucked away, was an old photograph. Her eyes filled with tears as she stared at the faded image. Her voice, barely audible, broke the stillness of the room. "They must never know," she whispered, the ticking of the wall clock the only sound that answered her. The small package arrived on a sunny Wednesday afternoon, its plain brown wrapping giving no hint of the secrets it held within. Mia was the first to notice, her eyes lighting up as she pulled the small package from the mailbox after school. She let out a gleeful squeal that echoed across the front yard, drawing Lila from the porch in a hurry. "They're here!" Mia clutched the box tightly to her chest, her excitement contagious. The DNA kits had finally arrived. Lila grabbed her sister's arm and tugged her inside, their feet barely touching the floor as they rushed to the kitchen table. With meticulous care, they unboxed the contents. 2 identical kits, each neatly packed with collection tubes, cotton swabs, and detailed instruction booklets. Lila held up the pamphlet, her analytical mind already piecing the steps together. "This feels so official," she murmured, her tone filled with awe as she scanned the instructions. "We have to be super careful not to mess up the samples," Mia said earnestly, her fingers hovering over the swabs as though they were precious artifacts. From the hallway, Elena watched them silently. Her grip on the doorframe was so tight her knuckles turned pale, her heart pounding against the weight of a secret she'd carried for 16 years. She wanted to intervene, to whisk the kits away before they could uncover what she'd worked so hard to hide. But she stayed rooted in place, her face a mask of strained composure as her daughters eagerly prepared for their journey into the past. The following morning at school, Mia practically vibrated with energy. She spotted her best friend Emma Harper by the lockers and wasted no time. "Emma, the kits came yesterday!" Her words spilled out in a rush, her excitement impossible to contain. Emma's eyes widened. "No way! Are you doing it tonight?" "Not until tonight," Lila chimed in, walking up with her backpack slung over one shoulder. Her voice was steadier than Mia's, but her own anticipation shone through. "We have to wait at least 30 minutes after eating or drinking before we take the samples." A small crowd of curious classmates began to gather around them as Mia explained. "It's simple," she said. "We swab our cheeks, seal everything up, and send it back." One girl piped up, "My cousin did one of those and found out she's part Norwegian." Another added, "Yeah, someone I know found a sister they didn't even know existed." Their teacher, Ms. Robinson, passed by and paused, drawn in by the buzz. "Understanding your heritage is an incredible experience," she said, her voice warm with encouragement. "It connects you to your roots and helps you appreciate the journey that brought you here. I can't wait to hear what you learn." That evening, As the sun dipped low and painted their room in amber light, Mia and Lila sat at their desks, the DNA kits spread out neatly before them. Lila set a timer on her phone and placed her water bottle aside. "Okay, 30 minutes. No food, no drinks," she declared. Mia twirled one of the sealed collection tubes between her fingers, her face bright with mischief. "What if we find out we're royalty or something?" she teased. "Like descended from some secret royal family?" Lila rolled her eyes, though a small smile tugged at her lips. "Right, because Mum's been stashing our tiaras in the attic all these years." They laughed, the room filled with light-hearted chatter as they speculated about their heritage, imagining distant relatives and untold stories waiting to be uncovered. When the timer finally beeped, the sisters leaned forward. All business now. They followed the instructions with unwavering focus, swabbing their cheeks with precision and sealing the samples in sterile vials. Once everything was carefully packed into return envelopes, the excitement lingered in the air. Meanwhile, in the next room, Eleanor sat on the edge of her bed, her hands tightly clasped. Her lips moved in silent prayer, her thoughts heavy with fear and longing. Through the thin walls, her daughter's muffled voices reached her, each word a reminder of the delicate truth she had shielded for so long. The days that followed felt endless. After school, Mia and Lila would race home, their backpacks bouncing as they darted through the front door. Each time, they checked their phones and laptops with bated breath. But nothing came. "Not yet," Lila would say calmly, her voice steady as she closed her laptop and returned to her homework. Her patience was a mask she wore well, even as she worked through algebra equations with quiet focus. Mia, however, was less composed. She refreshed her email constantly, her fingers tapping the screen in frustration until Lila finally snatched her phone away. "You're making me anxious," Lila scolded, her voice gentle but firm. "They said 7 to 10 business days, it's only been 5. In the kitchen, Eleanor moved like a ghost, going through her daily routines with an air of detachment. She cleaned the same counter twice, stared blankly at the tea kettle as it boiled, and folded laundry with trembling hands. The secret she carried weighed heavier each day, the walls of her carefully built world threatening to crumble. Her hands quivered slightly as she scrubbed the plates, the shadows beneath her eyes bearing the evidence of countless restless nights. Every notification ping from the girls' phones sent her pulse skyrocketing, her nerves fraying more with each sound. On the 8th day, golden afternoon light spilled through the living room windows, casting warmth on the walls as Mia's laptop let out a soft chime. Her heart jumped and her eyes locked onto the email's subject line. "Your results are ready." Her breath caught and she called out, her voice cracking with anticipation, "Lila, they're here!" Lila, abandoning her textbook in an instant, bolted to Mia's side. The sisters huddled together on the couch, their shoulders touching, breaths hitching in unison. With a shaky hand, Mia clicked on the email, revealing 2 separate reports, one for each twin. "Let's look at them together," Mia suggested, her voice tinged with a mix of nervousness and excitement as her cursor hovered over the first report. Lila gave a tight nod, and they both leaned closer, the air thick with anticipation. Mia's results popped up first, showing precisely what they had always expected. Her ancestry reflected their father's rich West African heritage, intertwined with the European lineage they had known about since childhood. As she scrolled down, the detailed breakdown captivated her. The percentages, the regions, the history. "This is amazing," she exclaimed, her voice brimming with awe. "Look, we can even pinpoint the exact regions of our ancestors." Her excitement waned as she glanced at Lila's screen. The color drained from Lila's face, her body frozen as if time had stopped. Lila's results were a stark contradiction to Mia's. Instead of reflecting the familiar West African roots, her DNA told a vastly different story. Predominantly South Asian ancestry, something entirely unexpected. But it wasn't just the ancestry that struck terror in their hearts. At the top of the report, a red warning banner blazed, "Important. Genetic anomaly detected. Medical attention strongly recommended." This has to be a mistake, Lila murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. Her hands trembled as she scrolled through the report, her eyes scanning the impossible details in disbelief. How is this even possible? We're twins! Mia grabbed Lila's hand, squeezing it tightly as panic surged through her. "Mom!" she shouted, her voice cracking with fear. "Mom, you need to see this!" Their mother, Eleanor, appeared in the doorway. Her face was pale, her expression one of resigned dread, as though she had been bracing herself for this moment. When the twins turned their laptops toward her, showing the glaringly different results, Elena's hand flew to her mouth. Her lips quivered as she whispered, "Delete it! Delete the email now." "Mom, what's happening?" Lila's voice broke as she rose from the couch, her tone laced with confusion and fear. "Why are our results so different? What's this genetic anomaly about?" "Please," Eleanor pleaded, stepping back from them, her voice trembling. "You have to delete it. You don't understand." "Then help us understand," Mia cried, tears brimming in her eyes. But Eleanor's only response was to turn and retreat down the hallway. The slam of her bedroom door reverberated through the house, followed by the sharp, final click of the lock. The twins stood frozen in the living room, the weight of the unknown pressing down on them. Their world had tilted off its axis, leaving them reeling in a whirlwind of questions and fear, like leaves caught in a violent autumn storm. As darkness descended, the house grew quiet, unease settling into every corner. Elena hadn't reappeared, her dinner tray untouched outside her door. Mia lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing. Every shadow seemed alive with unanswered questions. Around midnight, unable to bear the tension any longer, Mia made up her mind. Slipping out of bed, careful not to disturb Lila, who was finally asleep, she crept into the hallway. The floorboards groaned softly under her weight as she stopped outside their mother's room. The door was still locked, but Mia remembered the spare key hidden atop the doorframe, a secret she had discovered years ago during a childhood game of hide-and-seek. Her hands shook slightly as she reached upward, her fingers searching until they brushed against the cold metal of the key. The lock gave a quiet click, yielding to her touch. Inside, the soft glow of moonlight slipped through gauzy curtains, painting delicate silver patterns across Eleanor's sleeping figure. Mia held her breath, moving silently like a shadow toward the antique jewelry box perched on the dresser. Its intricate carvings and tiny, mysterious drawers had always held a magnetic allure. As children, they'd been forbidden even to touch it. Now, Mia's hands moved with practiced care, searching each compartment, her ears attuned to every creak and rustle. In the bottom drawer, hidden beneath a stack of faded birthday cards, her fingers encountered something rigid and worn. She pulled it free. A photograph, its edges soft and creased from age. Mia's pulse quickened as she held it under the moonlight. The picture revealed a younger Elena standing in what appeared to be a laboratory some 15 years ago. She was surrounded by somber figures clad in white coats, their expressions professional and reserved. But it wasn't the image itself that caused Mia to gasp. On the back, scrawled in hurried handwriting, were the chilling words, "They must never know." Mia's heart raced as she carefully returned the key, closed the door, and retreated to her shared room with Lila. She shook her sister awake, her voice low but urgent. "Lila, wake up! You need to see this!" Lila groaned, blinking against the sudden intrusion. "What time is it?" she mumbled groggily. "That doesn't matter," Mia whispered, flicking on the bedside lamp. "Just look." She held out the photograph, her hands trembling slightly. Lila sat up, her eyes sharpening as she studied the image. Her analytical mind immediately sprang to action. "Maybe Mom used to work in a lab," she suggested, though doubt flickered in her voice. "That could explain. Then why write this?" Mia interrupted, pointing to the ominous note. "And why hide it?" Lila turned the photo over again, her brows knit in concentration. "We need more information," she said at last. "Remember the DNA test results? They mentioned something about medical attention. Maybe we should talk to Dr. Peterson, our family doctor." "But Mom would find out," Mia countered. "Not if we go on our own," Lila reasoned. "We're 16. We can schedule appointments ourselves." The next morning, with Elena still locked in her room, the twins huddled at their computer and drafted an email to the DNA testing company. Lila carefully crafted the message, her tone measured and professional. "Regarding the flagged genetic anomaly in my results, could you provide additional information?" To their surprise, a response arrived within hours. They read it together, leaning close to the screen. "Urgent. We strongly recommend an immediate consultation with a qualified physician regarding the identified genetic marker. Due to confidentiality regulations, we cannot provide further details. Please seek medical attention as soon as possible." Mia clutched Lila's hand tightly. "They're saying it's serious," she whispered. "Then we definitely need to see Dr. Peterson," Lila replied, already reaching for her phone. "Something's not right, and Mum isn't going to tell us what it is." Later that afternoon, the sun cast elongated shadows across the pavement as Mia and Lila approached Dr. Singh's medical office, a familiar building that now felt oddly foreboding. The cheerful blue and white exterior had always been a comfort, but today it loomed large and imposing. "Are you sure about this?" Mia asked, gripping the strap of her backpack where she'd stashed printouts of their DNA results. Lila nodded firmly. "We need answers. Dr. Singh has known us forever." Inside, the reception area smelled of antiseptic and lavender air freshener. Behind the desk, Mrs. Chen, the receptionist who had known them since childhood, beamed. "The Carter twins! You're in luck! Dr. Singh just had a cancellation. Come right in." Minutes later, they found themselves seated in the examination room, surrounded by brightly colored posters promoting health and wellness. Despite the cheerful decor, unease hung thick in the air. As they waited for answers they weren't sure they were ready to hear. Dr. Singh stepped into the room, his face lighting up with a warm smile that softened the lines etched by time. His once jet-black hair was now streaked with silver, but the kindness in his eyes remained unchanged behind his wire-rimmed glasses. "What brings you girls here today, and where's your mother?" he asked, settling onto his stool with a gentle creak. Lila took the lead, her tone steady as she explained their heritage project and the DNA tests. Mia silently reached into her bag and handed over the results. Dr. Singh's face shifted almost imperceptibly as he read through the papers, his composed expression faltering for just a moment. "I see," he murmured, the words heavy with unspoken meaning. "And your mother doesn't know you're here?" The twins shook their heads in unison. "I'd like to run some blood tests to confirm these findings," Dr. Singh said carefully, his voice calm but tinged with something unreadable. "Would that be all right?" The twins nodded, and the blood draw was swift and uneventful. The doctor labeled the samples and sent them to the lab with an urgent note, then asked the girls to wait in his office. Time dragged on. Mia sketched absent-mindedly in her notebook while Lila flipped through outdated medical journals, both girls tensing every time footsteps echoed down the hall. The fading light of early evening stretched the hours until a lab technician finally delivered an envelope. Dr. Singh opened it and scanned the results, his face going pale. Without a word, he stepped out of the room, leaving the door slightly ajar. The twins exchanged uneasy looks before creeping closer to eavesdrop. His voice was low but unmistakably strained as he spoke on the phone. "Yes, I understand the protocols. No, I'm certain. The markers match perfectly. Yes, they're both here." "National security risk?" "Absolutely. Please send someone immediately." Mia's hand clamped around Lila's, squeezing hard. "National security risk?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "That doesn't make sense," Lila replied, her rational mind struggling to find footing. "We're just normal high school students." The sound of approaching footsteps sent them scrambling back to their seats. Dr. Singh re-entered, his demeanor now formal and reserved. "Girls, some specialists are on their way to help us better understand these results. Please, stay calm." An hour later, the office door opened again. 2 men in dark suits walked in, flanked by 3 individuals in medical scrubs. Their expressions were carefully neutral, but their watchful eyes betrayed a heightened alertness. "Mia and Lila Carter," one of the men asked, though it wasn't a question. "We need you to come with us. For your own protection." Mia jumped to her feet, her voice sharp with defiance. "Protection from what? We haven't done anything wrong." Dr. Singh's voice wavered, pleading, "Please, girls. These people can help you. You need to go with them." Lila's sharp eyes studied each face in the room, her thoughts racing. "We don't have a choice, do we?" The silence that followed confirmed her suspicion. The twins reluctantly gathered their belongings, instinctively moving closer to each other. The medical team formed a protective barrier as they were escorted through a back exit, away from prying eyes. The new environment was sterile and cold, its stark walls devoid of windows. It felt more clinical than oppressive, yet the absence of freedom weighed heavily on them. Mia's fingers trembled as she clutched Lila's hand. Meanwhile, Lila sat motionless, her mind churning through possibilities and theories. "What do you think they want from us?" Mia asked, her voice low, the edge of fear evident. Before Lila could answer, the door opened. A tall woman entered, her professional attire as sharp as her confident stride. Her eyes, though kind, carried a gravity that made her seem both approachable and formidable. She pulled up a chair and sat down across from them, her demeanor calm but serious. "I'm Detective Erin Taylor," she introduced herself, her voice steady and reassuring. "I know this is all very frightening, but I want you to understand. You're not under arrest. We brought you here to protect you." Mia leaned forward, her gaze locked on the detectives. Despite the fear in her eyes, there was also a flicker of resolve. "Protection from what? We haven't done anything wrong. We just took a DNA test for school." Mia's voice trembled as she glanced nervously at her sister. "I understand your frustration," Detective Erin Taylor replied, her calm tone steady as she leaned forward slightly. "But I need more information before I can explain. Can you trust me to figure this out?" Lila, always the more analytical of the two, frowned. "What kind of information? Is this about the DNA test? It flagged something, didn't it? Is that why we're here?" Detective Taylor held their gaze, her eyes softening. "I promise, As soon as I can, I'll tell you everything. For now, all you need to know is that you're safe here." After making sure the girls had water and some granola bars from the facility's supply, Taylor stepped into the stark, echoing hallway. Dr. Singh was waiting nearby, his usual composed demeanor unraveling as he toyed nervously with the end of his tie. "Doctor," Taylor began, her tone clipped with urgency, "I need answers. Why are two high school girls suddenly a matter of national security?" Dr. Singh shook his head, his voice low. "I'm sorry, Detective. This goes beyond us. There's a higher directive in place. I'm not authorized to discuss the details. These are kids, Doctor. Whatever this is, it's not their fault." Singh's gaze sharpened as he interrupted. "Exactly. None of this is their fault. Don't forget that, Detective." Back in the observation room, Mia and Lila huddled together on a worn love seat, their fingers intertwined. The harsh, institutional lights cast uneasy shadows, emphasizing the worry etched on their faces. "I think we can trust her," Mia murmured, her natural optimism shining through. "Detective Taylor seems different." Lila, ever cautious, furrowed her brow. "Maybe. But we have to be careful. Not everyone is going to have our back." "She's trying to help us. I can feel it," Mia insisted, squeezing her sister's hand for reassurance. Lila sighed. "Maybe. For now, she's all we've got. But we need answers soon. Real ones." The room fell silent, save for the faint hum of the ventilation system and the distant sound of hurried footsteps. The twins sat lost in their thoughts, their clasped hands anchoring them in a whirlwind of uncertainty. As sunlight strained through the reinforced windows of her temporary office, Detective Taylor sifted through a thin stack of documents. The room was utilitarian, with just a metal desk, 2 chairs, and a computer, humming quietly in the background. Her trained eyes scanned the files meticulously. At first glance, the Carter family seemed unremarkable. School records painted the girls as high-achieving students. Medical histories showed nothing out of the ordinary: childhood colds and standard vaccinations. But one thing stood out: the absence of a father's name on the twins' birth certificates. Taylor's instinct told her there was more. Then she found it: a set of sealed records, cryptically labeled Government Medical Program Discontinued. The dates matched the year the twins were born. Her pulse quickened as she jotted down reference numbers to investigate further. Down the hall, Eleanor Carter sat in an interrogation room, her shoulders slumped and hands clasped tightly in her lap. Her eyes, puffy from crying, barely lifted as Detective Taylor entered. "Mrs. Carter," Taylor began gently, taking the seat across from her. "I know this is difficult, but my priority is keeping Mia and Lila safe. To do that, I need your help." Eleanor's lips quivered as she whispered, "Just keep them safe. That's all that matters now." "We can protect them better if we understand the threat," Taylor pressed. "Can you tell me about their father or your involvement in any medical programs 15 years ago?" Elena's face turned ashen. She shook her head vigorously, her voice trembling. "Keep them safe," she repeated, this time with more resolve. "That's all I'll say. I can't say anything else." Taylor sighed, frustrated but empathetic. She left Elena under observation and made her way to the facility's small records library. Answers were buried somewhere. Taylor just had to dig deep enough to find them. The air was heavy with the scent of aged paper and the faint tang of dust. Filing cabinets lined the room, standing like silent sentinels guarding secrets long buried. Erin moved with meticulous precision, her fingers skimming over restricted indexes, hunting for any trace of the elusive reference tied to the medical program. Hours ticked by in tense silence, until finally she found it. A solitary entry labeled Project Genesis. The file was a patchwork of blacked-out text, names and locations obscured by thick, unforgiving ink. Yet, among the censorship, fragments emerged: multiple births, terminated experiments, and a chilling trend of surrogate mothers disappearing entirely from all records. Her hands trembled as she scribbled down the names of a few visible scientists and the date of the project's supposed closure, exactly 15 years ago. That number rang in her mind like an alarm bell. She thought of the twins confined in their stark room, Eleanor's haunted, wordless fear, and Dr. Singh's cryptic warning. It wasn't their fault. The pieces were sliding into place, forming a picture darker and more twisted with every new revelation. Whatever Project Genesis had been, its shadow loomed large over the Carter family. And now, after a decade and a half, those secrets were clawing their way to the surface. In her mind's eye, Erin could see the contours of a sinister pattern, something far beyond a defunct medical project. Something that explained why two teenage girls were suddenly labeled threats to national security, and why Eleanor Carter was too terrified to speak a word of it. The cafeteria's fluorescent lights buzzed faintly, casting a sterile glow over the sparsely furnished room. Mia and Lila sat at a corner table, their dinner trays barely touched. The meal was bland and institutional: dry chicken, steamed vegetables, a small cup of pudding, but neither had much appetite. Mia caught the furtive glances of the facility staff, the murmured conversations behind cupped hands, and the way everyone seemed to keep a deliberate distance. Her stomach knotted with unease as she pushed peas around her plate, trying to look calm while discreetly scanning the room. A flicker from the wall-mounted TV snagged her attention. The evening news hummed softly. A report about unearthed government projects from decades ago scrolling across the screen. The words were vague: ethical breaches, classified research, but a chill ran down her spine. She leaned closer to her sister. "Lila," she whispered, "maybe we should tell Detective Taylor about the photo I found in Mom's room." Lila's gaze hardened, her mind churning through the implications. Finally, she nodded. "You're right. Detective Taylor seems like she actually wants to help us. That photo might be a key piece of evidence, especially with the scientists and that strange message on the back. Do you think it's tied to what's happening now?" Elsewhere, Erin Taylor sat at her desk, exhaustion weighing heavy on her shoulders as she reached for her phone. She dialed with urgency, the sound of ringing filling the silence until a familiar voice answered. "Ethan, it's Erin. I need a favor." "Erin?" Agent Ethan Navarro sounded hesitant. "Do you have any idea what time it is?" "I know, and I'm sorry, but this is important." Her voice dropped, laced with a quiet desperation. "I need you to dig into something called Project Genesis. It would have been active about 15 years ago." There was a long, loaded pause. Erin, that's not something I can just poke around in. Those files are locked up tight." "Please, Ethan," she pleaded. "This is life or death. 2 teenage girls' lives could depend on it. I wouldn't ask if it weren't critical." Another pause, followed by a reluctant sigh. "All right. Give me a day or two. But, Erin, be careful. Some doors are locked for a reason." Later that night, in their dimly lit holding room, Mia and Lila requested to see Detective Taylor. When she arrived, her expression radiated a genuine concern that made Mia feel, for the first time in days, a small glimmer of safety. With a shaky breath, she reached into her pocket and pulled out a crumpled photograph. "We found this in our mum's room," she explained, smoothing the picture flat against the table. Erin leaned closer, her brows furrowing as she examined the image. A younger Eleanor Carter stood at the center, surrounded by figures in pristine white lab coats. They were posed in what looked unmistakably like a sterile, high-tech laboratory. She turned the photograph over, her eyes catching the faded ink, marking the date, 15 years ago. Beneath it, an unsettling message was scrawled: "They must never know." Erin's voice faltered as she stared at the image, her expression sharpening. This could be significant. Thank you for trusting me with this. She looked up at the twins, her gaze steady yet warm. I promise you both, we'll uncover the truth behind this, and no matter what we find, I'll make sure you're safe. For the first time in weeks, Mia and Lila felt the faint stirrings of hope. Their eyes met, an unspoken bond passing between them. Whatever secrets lingered in their past, whatever Project Genesis had buried, they weren't facing it alone anymore. The soft morning light filtered through the blinds in Erin's temporary office as she opened her secure email. Her pulse quickened when she spotted Ethan Navarro's name. The subject line read simply, Re-E, Project Genesis Confidential. Her hands trembled as she clicked the message, the words within making her stomach churn. Project Genesis wasn't just a genetic engineering project, it was a covert operation. Women were recruited under the guise of fertility treatments, never knowing they were part of an experiment to create genetically enhanced children. Most pregnancies failed. Those that succeeded. Erin, the ethical violations here are staggering. I'm sending this through encrypted channels, but you need to be careful. Powerful people are involved. Erin leaned back in her chair, her fingers threading through her hair as she processed the implications. Everything was beginning to align. Lila's unique genetic anomaly, Elena's evasiveness, the government's aggressive interest in the twins. These weren't ordinary children. They were products of unauthorized, morally corrupt experimentation. Fury bubbled within her. How could anyone exploit women desperate to become mothers, only to use them as pawns in such a sinister game? Her thoughts lingered on Elena, young, vulnerable, and unknowingly pulled into a nightmare. In a small holding room, Mia and Lila sat shoulder to shoulder on a worn couch. When Erin entered, their wide eyes met hers, a fragile blend of hope and fear etched on their faces. Erin's chest tightened as she took a seat across from them. I've uncovered some things about your mum's past, she began, her voice measured but soft. Years ago, she was involved in a government program. It wasn't exactly what she thought it was. Mia's lips quivered, her voice barely audible. What kind of program? A medical program, Erin explained gently. That's all I can confirm right now. I need more details before I can say anything else. Lila's analytical mind took over. Is this why our DNA is so strange? Why I have that anomaly? Erin nodded slowly. It seems to be connected, yes. Tears spilled down Mia's cheeks. So, Mom lied to us? Our whole lives? Your mother loves you both deeply, Erin said firmly. This isn't about her lying. It's about something bigger, something she might not have been able to tell you to protect you. Later, Erin stood at the threshold of Elena's detention cell. The woman sat hunched on her cot, her figure small and weary. At Erin's quiet words, I know about Project Genesis. Eleanor's head snapped up, her eyes brimming with tears. Please, she begged, her voice trembling. Please, just keep my girl safe. Then help me, Erin urged, stepping closer. Tell me who's behind this. Help me protect them. But Eleanor shook her head, her expression consumed by fear. You don't understand, she whispered. They're still out there. They'll come for my daughters now that they know. Who's coming for them? Erin pressed, desperation edging her voice, but Eleanor simply hugged herself, rocking back and forth. Just keep them safe. Please. Frustrated but resolute, Erin left the cell. She now had more pieces of the puzzle, but the picture they formed was even darker than she had feared. Somewhere, in the shadows, someone powerful was watching. And they wanted Mia and Lila back. In the dim glow of the facility's records room, Erin's hands moved with purpose, rifling through the trove of files now within her limited but newly expanded clearance. Each document she touched seemed to carry a fragment of a larger, hidden story. Manila folders, thick with the weight of buried truths, lay scattered across the cold metal desk. Her pulse quickened when she stumbled upon birth records from 15 years ago. The details aligned perfectly. Twin girls, born at the same hospital where Elena's photograph had been taken. What truly stole her breath was a hasty scrawl in red ink at the bottom of one document. Subject BJ disappeared with subjects A1 and A2 before final phase. Project terminated immediately. Erin's lips moved silently as she pieced it together. BJ, Elena Carter. Flipping through more pages, she unearthed geographic tracking data. It painted a deliberate pattern of movement away from the facility, ending in silence, a vanishing act. Elena hadn't simply escaped. She had orchestrated every step, shielding her unborn daughters from a sinister conclusion to the final phase. In their small, sterile room, Mia sat cross-legged on the edge of her bed, her mind racing to make sense of the chaos unraveling around them. What if... Her voice broke under the weight of her fears. What if Mom never wanted us? What if we were just part of some assignment? Lila, who had been pacing the room, halted abruptly and sat beside her sister. She reached for Mia's hand, gripping it tightly. That's not true. Think about it. Every birthday cake she baked from scratch. Every night she stayed up when we were sick. And remember how she cried at our middle school graduation? Mia shook her head, her voice barely above a whisper. But she lied, Lila. Everything we believed in, our whole lives, it was all a lie. Lila's gaze softened, but her tone remained steady. No, the love was real. Every bit of it. Mum risked everything to keep us safe. Whatever this Project Genesis was, she chose us. She ran to protect us. Mia rested her head against Lila's shoulder, her voice trembling but resolute. At least I know one thing is real. You're my sister. Maybe not by DNA, but DNA doesn't matter, Lila interjected, finishing the thought. We're sisters in every way that counts. Later that evening, Erin returned, exhaustion etched into every line of her face. She carried not just weariness, but the burden of memories long hidden. Pulling up a chair, she sat across from the twins. Her voice was low but steady. I need to tell you something, she began. Years ago I had a niece. Her name was Jada. She was brilliant, kind, and extraordinary. Like you, Lila, she had certain genetic markers that made her special. Erin's hands clenched together tightly. They said they wanted to help her. They took her for testing. She never came home. Her case was buried under government files so deep no one could find her. Mia reached out, resting a hand on Erin's arm. Is that why you're helping us? Erin nodded, her eyes blazing with determination. When I saw your file, I knew I couldn't let history repeat itself. What they did to Jada, to your mother, to you, it ends here. I swear it. Lila studied Erin's face, searching for truth. That's why you understand why Mom ran. She was scared, just like you were for Jada. Erin's voice softened. Your mother did what I couldn't. She protected you in the only way she knew how. The twins exchanged a glance, an unspoken agreement passing between them. In that moment, Erin wasn't just an agent or a guardian. She was their ally. Their trust in her solidified. The following morning, Erin sat at her desk sipping a coffee that had gone lukewarm hours ago. Her phone buzzed, and the message from Agent Navarro sent a jolt through her. Erin, I've got a lead. Dr. Adrian Kane. He was one of the top scientists in Project Genesis, oversaw most of the genetic work. Erin's fingers trembled as she reached for a photo Mia had discovered earlier. Her eyes scanned the faces in the image. Lab coats clustered around Eleanor. One of them had to be Kane. The timestamp confirmed it matched the Project Genesis timeline. Walking briskly through the facility's sterile corridors, Erin spotted Dr. Singh heading toward the medical wing. She quickened her steps, calling out firmly, "Dr. Singh, can I have a word?" Her tone was calm, but insistent. He hesitated, glancing around before gesturing for her to follow him into an empty consultation room. His voice dropped to a whisper. "How did you come across that name?" His eyes darted nervously, betraying the secrets he held. "That's not what matters. The truth does. For those girls." Dr. Singh's usually composed demeanor cracked slightly, betraying his inner turmoil. He hesitated before continuing. "Dr. Kane. He was the lead researcher on the genetic experiments. Brilliant man. But his methods..." He trailed off, wrestling with the weight of his words. Erin's breath caught as the implications hit her. "Are you saying Dr. Kane is their biological father?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Singh nodded, his expression grave. "Yes, he used his own DNA in the experiments. Detective, be cautious with this information. There are powerful forces at play. Forces determined to keep this buried." As evening fell, the sterile glow of the facility's lights illuminated Erin's path to the twins' holding room. The girls looked up as she entered, their faces a fragile mix of hope and unease. Settling into a chair, Erin took a steadying breath. "We have a lead," she began carefully. "Dr. Adrian Kane. He was deeply involved in Project Genesis." Mia leaned forward, her eyes lighting with curiosity. "Did he know our mom?" she asked eagerly. Erin hesitated, weighing her words. "We're still piecing it together, but finding him might give us answers about everything that happened. I need you both to trust me while we figure this out safely." Lila, always the more guarded of the two, nodded thoughtfully. "We trust you, Detective Taylor." Mia echoed softly, "You're the only one being honest with us right now." In her temporary office, Erin spread out the Project Genesis files across her desk, the fluorescent lights casting sharp shadows over the documents. Her eyes darted between a faded photograph of lab personnel and a grainy image of Dr. Kane from over a decade ago. His credentials leaped off the page: advanced degrees, accolades, groundbreaking research in genetics. Then, as if overnight, he had vanished, coinciding with the time Elena fled with the twins. Erin picked up her secure phone, dialing quickly. "This is Detective Taylor. I need high-security transport for 3 civilians. Unmarked vehicles, maximum discretion," she ordered. After a brief pause, she added, "Yes, within the hour." Back in their room, Mia sat cross-legged on her bunk, staring intently at the mysterious photo in her hands. Her fingers traced the outlines of the scientists gathered around her mother, her artist's eye searching for familiarity. Across the room, Lila paced, her measured steps filling the silence with a rhythmic beat. When Erin walked in, both girls turned to her with quiet expectation. "We're moving you to a safer location," Erin announced gently. "You, your sister, and your mother." Mia's voice wavered as she spoke. "Detective? Dr. Kane, is he our father?" Erin met their eyes as she sat down, her tone steady but soft. "The evidence strongly suggests he is. We're still confirming details, but it seems very likely." Lila stopped pacing abruptly. "So that's why our DNA shows anomalies. We were engineered." Mia's voice grew firm. "No matter what happened back then, our mother loves us. We'll protect her." Later, in Elena's detention room, Erin laid out the relocation plan. Elena sat stiffly, her hands clenched tightly together. "We know about Dr. Kane," Erin said gently, her voice laced with understanding. Elena's shoulders trembled, her tightly guarded composure breaking. "Kane never wanted this," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "He was forced." Despite Erin's careful prompting, Elena refused to elaborate, but her expression told a deeper story, a tangle of fear, regret, and something close to sympathy whenever Dr. Kane's name arose. The case was unraveling into something more intricate with every new discovery. By late afternoon, the low hum of an unmarked van filled the underground garage as the Carter family prepared to leave. The sunlight barely reached the dim space, casting long shadows that mirrored the uncertainty surrounding them. "Stay close," Erin instructed, her hand resting firmly yet reassuringly on Mia's shoulder. The weight of the moment was palpable, but her resolve remained steady as she ushered them toward the waiting vehicle, determined to protect the fragile truth she had uncovered. The van's side door slid open with a quiet creak as Officer Claire Morgan completed one last sweep of the perimeter. Elena climbed in first, her movements rigid with unease. Mia and Lila followed closely, settling into the middle row of seats. "All clear," Officer Morgan announced, taking her place in the passenger seat while Navarro slipped behind the wheel. As twilight descended over the city, the van navigated through streets where traffic had grown thin and sporadic. Mia stared out the window, her artist's gaze tracing the way the dimming sunlight streaked the horizon with deep purples and fiery oranges. A flash of movement caught her eye. A black SUV, 3 cars back. She leaned forward slightly and whispered, "Detective Taylor." "That black SUV. I've seen it before." Lila turned cautiously, her mind already calculating the odds. "It's been following us for exactly 2 miles, she said softly, her tone measured but alert. Erin's face tightened and she leaned toward Navarro. "Take the next detour. Let's see if they stick with us." The van veered onto a less traveled road, and almost immediately the SUV sped up, closing the distance. Then, without warning, it swerved abruptly, attempting to force the van toward the shoulder. "Hold on!" Navarro shouted, gripping the wheel as he expertly maneuvered the van onto a narrow dirt road. Behind them, the SUV skidded in the slick mud, its tires spinning futilely. "Circle back," Erin ordered, her voice steady despite the tension. "Take the alternate route we planned." Elena clutched her daughters tightly, her face drained of color. The van jostled and bounced along the uneven trail, each bump putting more distance between them and their pursuers. Through the rear window, they could see the SUV growing smaller, trapped in the mire. "Everyone okay?" Officer Morgan asked, turning to check on the passengers. The twins nodded silently, while Eleanor's arms remained locked around them, her wide eyes betraying her lingering fear. They traveled in tense silence through back roads, the oppressive darkness only broken by the van's headlights. Finally, just before midnight, they arrived at the safe house. Nestled among towering pines, the small cabin seemed to blend into its surroundings, its weathered wood exterior almost camouflaged in the dense forest. Inside, the space was modest, furnished only with the essentials: a few chairs, a small table, basic kitchen tools, and beds with plain sheets. "Secure the area," Erin instructed. Navarro immediately began checking the locks and testing the surveillance equipment, while Officer Morgan positioned herself near the front door, ever watchful. The twins found their way to a small bedroom. 2 simple beds with cotton sheets sat against opposite walls. Mia climbed onto one, sitting cross-legged, while Lila perched on the edge of the other. In the faint glow of a bedside lamp, tears streaked silently down Lila's face. "Hey," Mia murmured, crossing the room to sit beside her sister. "We're still us. That doesn't change." "But what if—" Lila's voice broke. "What if we're just some experiment? What if Dr. Kane—" "Stop," Mia interrupted, gently taking her sister's hand. "We're sisters. That's what matters. Not DNA, not Kane, not any of this. Just us." In the dimly lit living room, Erin and Navarro spread out the files from Project Genesis across the battered coffee table. Flashlights illuminated yellowed pages and grainy photographs. Navarro tapped a handwritten address scribbled in the margin of a document. "Look at this," he said quietly. "Could be Kane's old lab." Erin studied the address, her expression sharpening with focus. From the shadowy corner of the room, Eleanor's voice broke the stillness. Barely above a whisper, she said, "If you find him, be careful. There are worse people behind him." Erin glanced up sharply, but Eleanor had already retreated into silence, her warning lingering heavily in the room. The first rays of dawn filtered through the safe house windows, cutting through the lingering darkness. Erin unfolded a detailed map across the kitchen table. Her finger traced the address from the files, stopping on a location in the industrial outskirts of the city. "It's remote," Navarro noted, leaning over her shoulder. "But we should scout it first. No telling what's waiting for us." From the doorway, Eleanor stood wringing her hands, her face drawn with worry. The twins sat at the table, their gazes locked on the point Erin had marked on the map. Lila's sharp eyes scanned the surrounding streets, her mind working methodically, while Mia sketched out the layout of the area in her notebook with careful precision. By early afternoon, Navarro and Officer Morgan conducted their routine sweep of the perimeter. The crisp spring air carried a faint tang of pine as they moved cautiously through the dense woods surrounding the safe house. At the edge of the tree line, Navarro came to a sudden halt. Check this out," he said, pointing to fresh footprints etched into the damp earth. Officer Morgan knelt to get a closer look. "Multiple sets," she confirmed grimly. "Someone's been watching us." They hurried back to report their discovery to Erin, who stiffened at the news. "We can't stay here much longer," she said decisively, glancing toward the Carter family clustered in the living room. As the late afternoon light slanted across the room, casting elongated shadows, Elena finally spoke. Her voice was shaky, tears streaming down her cheeks. 15 years ago, they chose me as a surrogate," she began. "I thought I was helping a childless couple, but then I uncovered the truth behind the genetic experiments." Her tear-filled gaze moved to her daughters, filled with both fierce love and deep fear. "When they shut down Project Genesis, I knew I had to run with you both." Mia and Lila instinctively drew closer to their mother as she continued. "Dr. Kane, he cared about you two, he truly did, but they had leverage over him, forced him to keep the experiments going." Her hands trembled as she clasped them tightly. "Now, they want you back. They want to start it all again." Erin listened intently, her jaw tightening as Navarro and Officer Morgan exchanged a grim look, standing nearby with heightened vigilance. The oppressive weight of Eleanor's confession settled over the room like a suffocating fog. As darkness thickened, wrapping around the safe house, Detective Erin Taylor and Agent Navarro prepared to leave. The pair moved silently, checking their equipment and rehearsing their cover one last time. Erin donned faded workwear and a construction vest, blending into the industrial setting, while Navarro carried a battered toolbox to complete their disguise. "Stay sharp," Erin murmured to Officer Morgan. "If anything feels wrong, get them out immediately." From the window, Mia and Lila watched their protectors slip into an unmarked sedan. Mia's fingers traced absent-minded patterns on the foggy glass, her nerves a raw edge, while Lila stood motionless, memorizing every detail of their departure with hawk-like focus. By mid-morning, Erin and Navarro had stationed themselves near an abandoned warehouse in a desolate industrial zone. Though it appeared deserted at first glance, their practiced eyes quickly picked up subtle signs of activity. A white van with darkly tinted windows sat concealed behind the building, and a man dressed in civilian clothes paced the area in a calculated yet casual manner. "Over there," Navarro whispered, lifting his phone to snap photos. "The door." Erin's eyes narrowed as they landed on a rusted metal door bearing a faint but unmistakable emblem, the Project Genesis symbol they'd studied in classified documents. Back at the safe house, the mood was tense. Mia sat cross-legged on the couch, her sketchbook a small refuge as she filled its pages with swirling abstract patterns to calm her racing thoughts. Beside her, Lila studied an old photograph of their mother with a group of scientists, her eyes scanning every detail with unrelenting focus. Suddenly, Lila's breath caught. "Look at this," she said, pointing to the ID badge of one of the scientists in the photo. "That emblem. It's the same one Erin described." Her sharp mind pieced together the implications instantly. They never really shut it down, did they? Eleanor, seated nearby, paled visibly at her daughter's realization. "No," she murmured, her voice a whisper as her hands began to tremble. They just went deeper underground. Officer Morgan, stationed by the window with her hand always near her firearm, tensed as the weight of the revelation sank in. The stark reality of the danger surrounding them crystallized in the room's heavy silence. The afternoon sunlight stretched into long, distorted shapes across the safehouse floor when Erin and Navarro returned, their sedan crunching up the gravel driveway. Their expressions were grim as they entered, finding the others gathered anxiously in the living room, their unease palpable in the charged air. The twins huddled together on the frayed couch, their movements mirroring the tension in the room. Officer Morgan stood watch by the window, her eyes scanning the outside with a hawk-like intensity. "They're active," Erin said, her voice tight with urgency. "The warehouse isn't abandoned. There's security, equipment. Everything points to ongoing operations." Her gaze flicked to Eleanor, who seemed to retreat further into herself, clutching a half-empty cup of tea with trembling hands. Navarro pulled out his phone, the screen glowing as he displayed the photos he'd taken. "The emblem matches perfectly," he said, his voice edged with certainty. "This has to be connected to Project Genesis." Erin's jaw tightened. "We can't stay here," she declared, her tone leaving no room for doubt. "They could have already tracked us." Elena looked up, her face pale and worn, dark circles under her eyes, betraying countless sleepless nights. Despite her exhaustion, her voice held a quiet resolve. "Whatever you think is best, Detective," she said softly. "I'll do whatever it takes to keep my girls safe." Mia leaned closer to her mother, wrapping an arm protectively around her shoulders, while Lila stood near the window, her eyes sharp and calculating, silently weighing their options. Officer Morgan gripped her weapon tighter, scanning the tree line with a renewed sense of urgency. "Pack only what's essential," Erin instructed, her voice commanding. "We leave in 30 minutes. The room shifted into action as everyone scattered to gather their belongings. In their small shared room, Mia and Lila moved quickly, shoving clothes into worn backpacks. Their actions were rushed, yet heavy with the weight of uncertainty. Home, the facility, even this so-called safe house. None of it felt secure. It was as if every step forward led deeper into danger. "Mom," Mia called quietly, finding Elena in the kitchen, her hands resting on the counter as though to steady herself. "We'll get through this. Together." Eleanor pulled her daughter into a firm embrace, then reached for Lila, drawing her close. "Once we expose the truth," she whispered, her voice filled with fragile hope, "they won't be able to hurt us anymore. The truth will protect us." Her words, though meant to comfort, made her daughter's hearts ache, the desperation in her voice cutting deeper than any threat they faced. Outside, Officer Morgan completed another perimeter sweep, her rifle at the ready. Erin and Navarro meticulously inspected the vehicles, double-checking their escape route. The sun began its descent, bathing the clearing in a warm orange glow. When they finally stepped outside, bags slung over their shoulders, the air felt unnaturally still. Officer Morgan noticed it first, a shift in the atmosphere, a subtle warning. She raised her weapon just as shadows moved at the edge of the forest. "Get down!" she yelled, firing a warning shot into the air. Chaos erupted in an instant. Masked figures in black tactical gear surged from the tree line, their movements swift and precise. Erin and Navarro drew their weapons, forming a protective barrier around the family as gunfire erupted. The twins screamed as two operatives seized Elena, dragging her toward the dense woods. "Mom!" Mia's cry tore through the air. Lila lunged to follow, but Navarro grabbed her, holding her back as dirt sprayed up from the gunfire around them. "Elena!" Erin shouted, aiming her weapon, but the operatives used Elena as a shield, their movements calculated to prevent any clear shot. Within moments, they vanished into the shadows of the forest, taking Elena with them. The remaining attackers retreated, leaving the group frozen in the aftermath. Mia collapsed to the ground, sobbing uncontrollably, while Lila stood motionless, her face pale and blank, guilt etched into her expression. Officer Morgan secured the perimeter, but the damage was irreparable. "We'll find her," Erin said firmly, her voice filled with unyielding determination. "Whatever it takes, we'll get your mother back." Her words were a promise, though the forest loomed ahead like a dark, unyielding wall. Flashlight beams sliced through the night as Officer Morgan and Navarro combed the area for any sign of Eleanor. The dense forest mocked their efforts, swallowing the light as if to hide its secrets. Detective Erin Taylor remained by the twins' side, her hand steady on the holster of her weapon, prepared for any further threats. Mia's sobs broke the oppressive silence. "This is all my fault," she choked out, her voice shaking. "If I hadn't insisted on those stupid DNA tests." "No," Lila interrupted, pulling her sister into a tight embrace. Her own voice trembled, but her resolve was clear. "We need to stay strong for Mom. She's protected us all these years. Now it's our turn to protect her." Erin nodded grimly. "Mia, your sister's right. Pointing fingers won't help us find her." They retreated into the safe house, the warmth inside feeling painfully out of sync with the icy fear gripping them. Erin knelt by the door, her sharp eyes scanning the muddy boot prints left behind in the struggle. Agent Navarro opened his laptop, swiftly pulling up footage from a concealed security camera they had installed. Grainy images flickered on the screen, showing masked figures dragging Elena toward a black SUV. The vehicle's tires kicked up dirt as it sped away. "They're taking her back to that lab," Erin muttered, examining a torn piece of black fabric she'd found near the door. "This might give us some DNA to work with." In a corner of the living room, the twins huddled together under a blanket. Lila clutched an old photograph of their mother with a group of scientists, her sharp mind refusing to quit. Suddenly, something caught her eye. A series of faint letters and numbers in the corner of the photo that she hadn't noticed before. "Mia, look at this," she whispered, pointing to the coded text. "Doesn't this match the documents Erin found earlier? The same letters and numbers are here." Mia's eyes widened. "You're right." She waved Erin over, excitement breaking through her fear. "Detective Taylor, look at this. We found something." Erin leaned in, her brow furrowed as she examined the photograph. Her expression shifted as hope glimmered in her eyes. "These might be coordinates," she said thoughtfully. She traced the coded text with her finger before straightening up. "This could be exactly what we need to find your mother." As the morning sun poured through the safe house windows, Erin sat hunched over her laptop. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, inputting the coded letters from the photograph into a secure database. Behind her, Agent Navarro hovered, cross-referencing the results with a list of industrial properties. "Here," Navarro said, pointing to the screen. "A decommissioned biotech facility just across the state line. These coordinates match perfectly." Erin nodded firmly. "That has to be it. It lines up with the intel we gathered earlier." Down the hall, in a small bedroom, Mia paced restlessly, her hands clenched into tight fists. "We can't just sit here while they have Mom," she burst out. "We need to go now." Lila reached for her sister's arm, her touch gentle but steady. "Mia, please," she said softly. "We have to think this through. If we rush in without a plan, we could make things worse." Tears welled in Mia's eyes as she sank onto the bed beside her twin. Their hands found each other, fingers intertwining in a gesture of mutual comfort. "I'm scared," Mia admitted in a shaky whisper. "Me too," Lila replied, her voice trembling with emotion. "But Mum has always protected us. Now it's our turn to be brave for her." Later that afternoon, Erin stepped out onto the safe house's back porch, her phone pressed to her ear. "Kendra, it's Erin Taylor. I need your help." On the other end, Kendra's voice was wary but professional. "What kind of trouble are you in now, Taylor?" "I need intel on private security firms," Erin explained. "The kind that work for covert organizations. The ones no one ever talks about." A long pause followed before Kendra responded. "These aren't your run-of-the-mill rent-a-cops, Erin. These groups operate with military-grade weapons, limitless funding, and zero accountability. They're as ruthless as it gets." Erin's jaw tightened as she absorbed the gravity of Kendra's words. "I understand, but I need everything you've got. We're out of options." "I'll send over what I have," Kendra replied with a resigned sigh. "But be careful, Erin. These people don't leave witnesses." Inside the cramped workshop behind the safe house, Agent Navarro meticulously arranged their gear on a worn workbench. His movements were deliberate as he checked each non-lethal weapon: stun guns, smoke grenades, and tranquilizer darts. Nearby, Officer Claire Morgan calibrated 2 surveillance drones. Her sharp gaze remained fixed on the devices as she tested their silent flight capabilities. Meanwhile, Erin spread out a faded floor plan across another table, its edges curled with age. The tension in the room was palpable, each person laser-focused on the mission that lay ahead. Her fingers skimmed the intricate map of the biotech facility, her touch lingering on the areas of highest security. "The main entrance is likely where they'll concentrate their defenses," she said, tapping the blueprint with precision. "But these service tunnels here, they might just be our way in." In a dim corner of the safe house, Mia and Lila Carter stood silently, their eyes fixed on the preparations unfolding before them. A heavy sense of purpose weighed the air, pressing down like an invisible force. This wasn't a game. These tools weren't mere replicas for practice. They were instruments for a high-stakes rescue. Lila's sharp mind analyzed every piece of equipment with clinical efficiency, while Mia's artistic perspective noticed the way the slanting afternoon light carved stark shadows across the workshop floor. "These encrypted radios will secure our communication," Navarro explained, holding up sleek black devices that gleamed faintly in the fading light. "Short range but reliable. Once we're inside, we can't afford the risk of using cell phones." In the kitchen, the twins huddled over an old photograph, its edges worn from countless examinations. This time, Mia's discerning gaze caught something new. On the scientists' badges and lab coats, subtle symbols formed patterns that seemed deliberate. "Look here," she said, her voice rising with excitement as her pencil began to sketch in her notebook. Her movements were swift and precise, each stroke bringing the patterns to life. "See how these repeat?" Lila leaned closer, her analytical mind clicking into high gear. "They're not just for decoration," she realized aloud. "These could be room designations, like a coded map for the different sections of the lab." Her finger pointed to a particular sequence, one that appeared frequently. "This one. It's near the areas where they're keeping the test subjects." Rushing to Erin with their discovery, they explained the significance. Erin's sharp eyes scanned the sketches, comparing them to the facility's blueprints spread across the table. "This could pinpoint where your mother is being held," she said, her tone carrying a mix of urgency and relief. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Erin gathered the team in the living room. Warm orange light streamed through dusty panes, casting long shadows on the wooden floor. "We move at midnight," she began, her voice steady and commanding. "The drones will give us a live feed, and we'll enter through the service tunnel." Her expression softened as she turned to the twins. "You've already done more than enough. Your mother sacrificed everything to protect you, and now it's our turn to bring her home." Mia's hand found Lila's, their fingers intertwining in mutual support. Tears shimmered in their eyes, but their resolve was unshaken. "We're ready," Lila said, her voice steady despite the knot of fear in her chest. "Whatever it takes," Mia echoed, her tone firm. Navarro and Morgan nodded in silent agreement, their determination mirroring that of the group. The team spent the final moments reviewing their roles, the room buzzing with quiet focus. Outside, the world darkened, shadows blanketing the safe house grounds as the first stars pierced the sky. Soon, the protective veil of night would cloak their movements. Two vehicles navigated forgotten backroads, the convoy slicing through the night. In the lead SUV, Agent Ethan Navarro gripped the wheel tightly, his eyes locked on the empty stretch of road ahead. Detective Erin Taylor sat beside him, her hand resting lightly on her encrypted radio, eyes scanning for any signs of danger. In the back seat, Mia and Lila sat close, their breaths steady but shallow, the fear roiling within them kept carefully at bay. Behind them, Officer Claire Morgan followed in an unmarked sedan, the vehicle blending seamlessly into the dark. Her radio remained silent, her focus unwavering. The convoy avoided major highways, sticking instead to rural routes where surveillance was sparse. Mia rested her forehead against the window, the cool glass soothing against her skin. Her artistic mind couldn't help but marvel at the way moonlight transformed the landscape into a silvery dreamscape. Beside her, Lila's thoughts churned, her logical mind racing through the facility's blueprints, committing every detail to memory. 10 minutes to the observation point, Navarro murmured, breaking the heavy silence. Erin gave a sharp nod, her hands moving instinctively to double-check her gear. The vehicles pulled into a secluded overlook, dense forest concealing their arrival. The team emerged, hushed and focused, gathering at the edge of the tree line. Erin handed out night vision binoculars, her voice low but firm as she gave final instructions. Below them, the biotech facility sprawled out like a dormant giant, its dim, yellow-hued lights casting an eerie glow in the otherwise pitch-black surroundings. Through the binoculars, they tracked the guards making their rounds, methodical, predictable patterns. 2 men stood stationed at the main gate, while another pair patrolled the perimeter fence. But what caught their attention was a less conspicuous entry point. A service door tucked into an underground loading dock, dimly lit and far less monitored. Mia's fingers quivered slightly as she lowered the binoculars, her breathing uneven. Somewhere deep within that cold labyrinth of concrete, her mother was being held. A reassuring squeeze on her shoulder pulled her back into the moment. Lila's touch was grounding, their twin bond an unshakable force, despite their opposing temperaments. Mia's free-spirited creativity and Lila's razor-sharp logic. For once, their differences didn't matter. They were completely in sync. "That service door," Erin whispered, pointing to the shadowy entrance. "Security's lighter there. We'll use the darkness to our advantage." Her voice, calm and commanding, steadied their nerves like a lighthouse in a storm. They moved out, advancing on foot with deliberate, soundless precision. Navarro led the way, his sharp eyes scanning ahead, while Morgan secured their rear. The twins stayed in the middle, flanked by Erin, each step measured and silent. They were halfway across the wooded stretch when a faint vibration broke the stillness. Lila jolted, startled. She pulled her phone from her pocket, frowning at the screen that should have stayed dark. Airplane mode was on. Her heart skipped a beat as she read the unexpected text. The others crowded around, their eyes darting across the message, glowing in the darkness. "I can help. Kane." Mia's chest tightened, a mixture of fear and hope. Could it really be him, their father? Lila's mind worked furiously, calculating probabilities, parsing the possibilities. Was it an ally reaching out from within, or a carefully laid trap? Erin studied the message with a scrutinizing gaze, her instincts urging caution while her gut hinted at authenticity. Mia's voice was barely a whisper, tinged with the vivid scenarios her artistic imagination had already conjured. Could he be inside, waiting for us? Erin's tone cut through the speculation. "We stick to the plan. Keep this in mind, but don't let it derail us." Her quiet authority left no room for argument, and they resumed their approach, each step now heavy with the weight of this new layer of uncertainty. Their mission remained unaltered. The goal was simple: find Elena and get her out, alive. As they reached the service door, Erin and Navarro worked seamlessly, bypassing the electronic lock with practiced efficiency. A soft click and hiss signaled their success. Morgan melted into the shadows outside, rifle ready, keeping watch. Inside, the corridor was sterile and unwelcoming, fluorescent lights flickering overhead, as if uncertain of their own purpose. The acrid scent of antiseptic filled the air, mingling with the low, mechanical hum of unseen machinery. Erin led the way with the twins close behind, while Navarro covered their rear. Every sound, muffled voices, distant footsteps, made Mia's pulse race. Clutching her sketches, Lila studied the badge patterns she'd recreated with her sister's help, her sharp eyes scanning each wall they passed. At a fork in the hallway, Lila touched Erin's arm and pointed right. "Here," she murmured, her voice barely audible. The markings on the wall matched the designs from the photos, confirming this section as the hub of the facility's primary research. Mia nodded in agreement, her artist's eye catching the visual cues with practiced ease. Erin trusted their combined judgment, changing course from the original plan and leading them down the right corridor. As they rounded another corner, the sound of approaching footsteps made the group freeze. Pressing themselves against the cold, hard wall, they held their breath. A man appeared, a scientist, pushing a cart loaded with medical supplies. Before he could react, Navarro moved with swift precision, securing him in a firm, silent hold. The man trembled, his eyes wide with fear. "Please," he stammered, his voice shaking. "I'm just a technician. I don't know anything important." Lila stepped forward, her analytical mind slicing through the noise to focus on what mattered most. "A woman was recently brought in," she said in a hurried whisper. "Dark hair, mid-40s. Where is she?" The scientist's gaze flickered anxiously. "The new subject?" "They moved her to the restricted wing," he murmured. "East section, past the red doors. You'll need special clearance to—" Erin cut him off with a sharp look, and Navarro swiftly restrained him with zip ties, stashing him in a supply closet. With a clearer goal in sight, they pressed on cautiously. Their path led them through a vast storage room crammed with filing cabinets and computer terminals. Mia's steps faltered as her gaze fell on a cluttered desk, scattered with photographs. Her breath caught. The images depicted children, dozens of them, each marked with clinical tags and serial numbers. Lila joined her, their hands instinctively finding each other as they read the files that lay alongside the photographs. The document spoke in detached clinical terms of enhanced cognitive abilities and promising genetic markers. Page after page outlined plans for the reactivation of Project Genesis, complete with projections of new test subjects. Erin's expression darkened as she absorbed the information. The scale of the operation was far beyond what they had feared. This wasn't just about Elena or the twins. It was a widespread threat, capable of endangering countless families. With every horrifying detail revealed, her resolve to dismantle the operation hardened. The twins exchanged stricken glances, the weight of their own engineered existence bearing down on them anew. These weren't just files. They represented real children, real lives, manipulated by the same people responsible for their creation. The clinical detachment in the documents made it all the more chilling. Navarro's urgent gesture from the doorway broke the spell. They needed to move. Erin shepherded the twins away from the desk, the evidence left behind as they resumed their mission. Silent and tense, the group navigated the labyrinthine corridors of the facility. Each step brought them past rooms filled with state-of-the-art medical equipment glimpsed through reinforced windows, centrifuges, gene sequencers, and other devices that laid bare the sinister purpose of the place. Erin moved with precision, her focus unshaken, while Navarro guarded their rear. The twins stayed close, their every movement muted against the gleaming floors. Then a muffled alarm echoed from somewhere deeper in the complex. The group froze, their hearts pounding. "We have to hurry," Mia whispered, her voice barely audible. They might know we're here. Reaching the end of the corridor, they encountered a heavy security door with an encrypted digital lock. Lila stepped forward, her sharp eyes scanning the intricate display. Without hesitation, her fingers danced over the keypad, entering a sequence of numbers as if guided by instinct. Erin watched, amazed as the lock disengaged on the first try. Lila's enhancements, her ability to recognize patterns and solve problems, had proven invaluable yet again. Beyond the door was another hallway, lined with reinforced doors outfitted with even more sophisticated security measures. One stood out, heavily fortified, bearing multiple locks and a biometric scanner. The group exchanged glances. This had to be it, Eleanor's prison. As they approached, a faint voice whispered through a small ventilation grate near the floor. "To your left." Erin crouched, signaling the others to stay alert. The voice continued, low and urgent. "I'm Dr. Kane. I can help you find Elena's cell." At the mention of their father's name, the twins stiffened. The voice pressed on, strained but steady. "They're monitoring my every move. They force me to keep working. Please, trust me. Your mother's life depends on it." Erin stayed crouched, her expression guarded as she measured the sincerity in Dr. Kane's plea. Mia and Lila exchanged uneasy glances, their emotions a turbulent mix of hope and suspicion as they faced the unexpected voice of their biological father. Detective Erin Taylor crouched near the ventilation grate, her sharp instincts tuned to every whispered syllable from Dr. Kane. Behind her, Mia and Lila Carter huddled together, their hearts pounding as they heard the man's voice for the first time. "Follow the corridor to its end," Dr. Kane urged in a low, tense tone. "You'll find a lab with a red biohazard sign. Inside, there's a control panel that can release all the cell locks." Erin's jaw clenched as she considered the weight of his instructions. Could this be a trap? They had no way to confirm, yet no viable alternative presented itself. Her gaze shifted to the twins, reading the vulnerability etched into their faces. Hope wavered in their wide eyes, but fear lingered too. "We don't have a choice," Mia murmured, her voice soft but resolute. Lila gave a small nod, her agreement solemn. "We have to trust him." With a sharp nod, Erin signaled their move. The group advanced, their steps nearly inaudible on the pristine, reflective floor. Agent Navarro took point, his seasoned eyes meticulously scanning every corner and doorway. The hallway stretched endlessly, harsh fluorescent lights casting unsettling shadows along the sterile walls. Suddenly, Navarro lifted his hand in a silent command to halt. Around the corner, a guard appeared, his expression quickly shifting to alarm at the sight of them. Before the guard could react, Navarro sprang into action. With calculated precision, he subdued the man, disarming him in a single, fluid motion. As the guard slipped into unconsciousness, he managed a chilling warning. "They know you're here." A wave of urgency swept over the team. After what felt like hours, but was mere minutes, the red biohazard sign loomed ahead, glowing ominously above a reinforced metal door. Through its narrow window, they spotted rows of servers emitting a low hum, and on the far wall, a large control panel. Erin got to work on the lock, her movements swift and practiced. Meanwhile, Lila prepared to tackle any digital obstacles, her intense focus honing in on potential security measures. Mia clutched a flashlight tightly, its beam steady despite the trembling in her hands. The weight of their mission was nearly suffocating. Somewhere deep within the facility, Elena Carter was waiting, hoping for rescue. Inside the lab, Erin's fingers danced over the control panel while Lila scanned the encrypted commands. Her sharp intellect, unraveling their complexities. "Here," Lila whispered, pointing to a specific sequence. "That's the master override." Erin quickly entered the sequence, and a series of mechanical clicks reverberated through the building's intercom. One by one, the locks on the cells began to release. At the bank of monitors, Mia's eyes darted over the screens until she froze. "There. I see, Mom," she exclaimed, her voice breaking. The monitor displayed Eleanor bound to a chair in a dimly lit cell, surrounded by advanced medical equipment that exuded an air of menace. Before they could react, a concealed door slid open behind them. Dr. Adrian Kane entered, his hands raised in surrender. The twins froze, staring at him in disbelief. The man who had haunted their lives was now standing before them, his face lined with exhaustion and regret. "I never wanted this," he began, his voice trembling. "They threatened my family, forced me to continue these experiments." His eyes, glistening with unshed tears, met those of his daughters. "Please, you must destroy this facility. Expose them." Erin kept her weapon aimed at him, her distrust palpable. Meanwhile, Mia and Lila stood paralyzed, torn between the raw vulnerability in his words and the weight of their past. "Save your mother and the other children," Kane implored. "I'll help you escape." With Kane leading, they hurried down the corridors now lined with open cells. Inside, each one were children, weak, frightened, and in various states of neglect. Many could barely stand, their hollow eyes reflecting unspeakable trauma. Mia's heart ached as she guided them out gently, her voice calm and soothing as she reassured them. Lila rushed ahead, finding Eleanor's cell. Erin made quick work of her restraints. "My girls," Elena sobbed as Mia and Lila enveloped her in their arms. Their reunion was brief. The wail of alarms shattered the moment, a chilling reminder that their time was up. Armed operatives emerged at the far end of the hallway, weapons poised and ready. "Hand over the twins," one demanded coldly. Navarro instinctively shifted into a defensive stance, his firearm aimed and steady. Mia and Lila exchanged a silent, resolute glance, an unspoken understanding passing between them. They knew the only way to end this nightmare was to unveil the truth to the world. Mia's eyes flickered to a computer terminal mounted near the wall. Her artistic mind instantly recognized its potential. "We can show everyone what's happening here," she murmured urgently to Lila. Her sister's quick mind grasped the plan immediately. As Navarro and Erin kept their weapons locked on the advancing operatives, Lila rushed to the terminal. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, her sharp, logical mind tearing through layers of security protocols with practiced ease. "Don't move," Erin ordered the operatives, her voice calm but commanding, her eyes never wavering. "We're ending this," she added with steel in her tone. The screen flared to life as Lila accessed the facility's live feed system. Dr. Kane stepped forward, punching in a set of override codes with deliberate precision. "This will send it to every major network," he said softly. Mia positioned the cameras with a keen, artistic eye, capturing searing images of the horrific scenes. The terrified children crammed into cramped cells, the grotesque medical instruments, and Elena's tattered restraints. The footage streamed live, a flood of horrifying truths cascading across the internet. It was impossible to suppress. The operatives' earpieces crackled with frantic commands as notifications began buzzing on their phones. The growing uncertainty etched on their faces was unmistakable. Finally, one operative muttered under his breath, "Stand down!" and they began retreating, their mission compromised. Erin gestured swiftly toward a side exit. "This way, quickly," she urged. The freed children, some weak and trembling, followed with Navarro and Elena lending support. At the threshold, Dr. Kane hesitated, his eyes meeting his daughter's. His voice broke as he whispered, "I'm sorry. I'll make sure none of this survives." Before either twin could respond, he turned and vanished into the hazy corridor. They stepped outside, the cool dawn air washing over them. The first light of day broke on the horizon, and Elena pulled her daughters close, holding them tightly as they left the nightmare behind, shaken but finally free. The community center bustled quietly with purposeful energy. Volunteers moved among the rescued children, offering blankets, warm meals, and soothing words. Golden sunlight streamed through the tall windows, casting a hopeful glow on the temporary refuge that Detective Erin Taylor had secured. Medical teams meticulously examined each child, documenting their injuries, while social workers sat nearby, prepared to provide emotional support. From the corner of the room, Mia watched a young girl, no older than 7, clutching a stuffed bear given by a gentle-faced volunteer. The sight made her chest tighten with emotion. Beside her, Lila stood silently, her logical mind still unraveling the magnitude of what they had seen and done. Mounted TV screens displayed breaking news, the leaked footage dominating every channel. Anchors spoke in grave tones, dissecting the fallout as government agencies scrambled to respond. Images of the facility flashed on screen while experts debated the dark implications of Project Genesis. "They're calling it the biggest medical scandal in decades," Lila said softly, her tone contemplative. Outside, under the sprawling branches of an ancient oak, Elena knelt on the dewy grass before her daughters. Her hands trembled as they clasped the twins, her voice thick with emotion. "I wanted to tell you so many times," she began haltingly. "Every birthday, every Christmas. I was just so terrified they'd find us." Tears streaked Mia's cheeks as she reached out to squeeze her mother's hand. "You protected us," Mia whispered, her voice tender but steady. Beside her, Lila nodded, her expression a mix of logic and understanding. For the first time, she fully grasped the weight of her mother's choices and the extraordinary strength it had taken to keep them safe. "Without you, we would have been nothing more than another statistic in their twisted experiments. You gave us something real, a life, a family," Mia said softly, her voice steady with emotion. "Family isn't about DNA," she added. "It's love that makes us whole." Elena wrapped her arms tightly around both girls, her years of fear and secrecy dissolving under the warmth of their forgiveness and understanding. Nearby, Erin Taylor stepped away from the heartfelt reunion, her phone pressed to her ear. Her sister's voice crackled through the line, thick with emotion. "You did it, Erin," her sister said, her words trembling with pride. "You uncovered what happened to those kids, to Jada." Erin's chest tightened as the weight of her niece's loss pressed against her memory. Jada had been taken years ago, lost to forces they hadn't understood back then. "I couldn't save her," Erin replied, her voice laced with regret. "But we made sure no one else will have to suffer like this." "You're a hero," her sister insisted, her words brimming with certainty. "Jada would be so proud of you." For the first time since the rescue, Erin allowed herself a small, tearful smile. The heavy grief she carried began to ease, replaced by the knowledge that her actions had spared other families from the same unbearable pain. Just beyond the center, journalists stood behind a police barricade, cameras rolling as they captured images of the survivors, the tireless volunteers, and the quiet strength of the children rediscovering their freedom. The truth was out now, no longer buried in secret files or concealed within the sterile walls of hidden labs. An autumn breeze swept through the park, scattering golden leaves along the weathered paths. Mia and Lila Carter sat with their mother, Eleanor, on a wooden bench. Their court-appropriate attire a stark contrast to the vibrant fall surroundings. Detective Erin Taylor stood a few steps away, her badge catching the late afternoon sunlight. The hearing earlier had been tense but groundbreaking, exposing the corruption behind Project Genesis. Several high-ranking officials now faced serious charges, their wealth and influence unable to shield them from the damning evidence brought to light by the twins' daring live stream. The judge was clear, Erin said, her tone edged with satisfaction. 3 more arrests this morning. Their entire operation is falling apart. Elena exhaled slowly, a quiet relief softening her posture. The constant fear that had haunted her for 15 long years was finally beginning to fade. "They can't hurt anyone else now," she murmured. Wow, what a journey, right? This story might be fictional, but it's packed with lessons and emotions that hit close to home. It reminds us of the incredible strength found in family bonds and the courage it takes to uncover hard truths. Eleanor's sacrifices, Mia and Lila's unwavering love for each other, and Erin's relentless pursuit of justice all weave a tale that's not just about survival, but about rediscovery, finding who you are, where you come from, and what really matters. It's a powerful reminder that our past doesn't define us, but understanding it can make us stronger. The way the twins embrace their differences and use their unique talents to fight for justice, inspiring. And the message is clear. Family isn't just about DNA. It's about love, trust, and the people who stand by you, no matter what. I'd love to hear your thoughts. What stood out to you the most? Did the twins' bravery resonate with you? Drop your comments below. I can't wait to see your perspectives. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you want more stories like this. Let's keep these conversations going.